this cozy space here at Waterstones. Of course, I'm very, very proud to be at this particular book launch because it is almost like a family gathering. It is very much. It's so nice to see so many close friends, and I'm really pleased that we have academics from SOAS, UCL, and Queen Mary College. I'm really, really pleased that people have actually taken the time to come here to join us. So, I'd like to begin by saying something about this issue of voices of older black women. In particular, black African Caribbean women. So much of my studies, so much of my engagement has been very much about the black American women. People like Collins, people like Hooks, people who are very much on top of our agenda. So much of the learning were from the American authors. So much of it was taken on board a syllabus which did not have so much of that African Caribbean dimension. And it is not that in the University of the West Indies we had these voices very much there. My view was, as far as black feminist epistemology was concerned, very much relating to the fact that on the one hand, the feminist agenda has been very much about the white women's agenda. And whilst I was very much part of that, in terms of my history, my learning, my view was that we needed to think very carefully about this womanist leaning. So what I did, I began conducting a fair amount of research, looking at African women from Nigeria, women from Ghana, women who were from Jamaica, women from Guyana, from other parts of the Caribbean. And I found lots and lots of voices. I found academics who were not there, up in the sort of, the halls of fame. But I also found in the studies, as far as women of my mother's generation, I found that the womanist, as opposed to feminist learning, was very much there in non-academic spaces. And so, my journey to Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Brent, Hackney, in all these sorts of areas, I found formidable women who basically gave me an extremely hard time conducting these interviews. Women who took on board, the fact that, yes, it was almost as if I was a daughter, and I needed to be told off at every step of the way. On one particular occasion, the women, I was prepared to have a focus group interview with 6, 7 women. But they were determined that they did not want to be known as African Caribbean. No. As far as they were concerned, they were West Indian women. So they were very, very sort of clear about their background, their identity, whether they were at one stage being told that, they were coloured, yes, they were black. At this stage, women of my mother's generation were making a fair amount of declarations. So, in terms of identity, in terms of the very focus, here I was wanting to find out how these women were learning in their later years, what learning meant to them. Most of this came off the back of the fact that I worked in the extramural departments in higher education. I spent a lot of time working with women who had come back to learning, almost like second chance learning. Women over the age of 50, women who were doing degree courses at Birkbeck and so on. And I was fascinated to know what it was that motivated these women. And I was very much interested in the fact that most of these women were not learning for themselves, they were indeed learning for the wider community. And in that particular regard, there were organisations who were working on a mother's survival project, for example. women who were working to tackle isolation, loneliness on council housing estates, women who were also members of perhaps regeneration boards, very much involved in the processes of change at a local level. So I found that it was very much about informal learning for most of these women I was interviewing. And as you will appreciate, in so many instances, you know, we are, in terms of this lifelong learning agenda, we're very concerned with how informal learning works from the point of view of moving the women from access courses onto degree courses. So we had a woman who was doing a Ransacker Explorers course at Ruskin College. And that particular woman was actually using that learning to be that active trade unionist. And it was very interesting because her story was about the fact that she felt she was learning to tackle social injustice. And one of the sort of projects she was involved in was a project to do with the pensions in the Caribbean. And the fact that, you know, she saw a fair amount of inequality. You know, why is it that in the bigger islands, for example, in Jamaica, and perhaps in Barbados, Little England, individuals who had worked equally a number of years in this country, who came in the early 50s, early 60s, and then when they went back to their islands, they were not entitled to that full pension. So this woman, you know, her mission was to tackle that. Her mission was to find out why and deal with that particular issue. But I also have to say that there were women who were learning because, from their point of view, they felt that when that door knocked, when it was an issue of the police coming to talk to their grandchild, yes, the actual experience that they went through from the point of view of incarceration in terms of young people, the sorts of issues which were occurring in the community, whether it was black-on-black violence, you know, whether it was, you know, very much, you know, something that was perhaps a strain on individual families, it was the roles of these women, the grandmothers, the mothers, the great-grandmothers, providing that source of support, providing stability to a large extent. And so, these particular women, whether they were involved in assertiveness training, communication skills training, IT skills in order to get themselves together, in order to communicate wider. And so, for me, it was very much about this concept of matriarchal learning hubs. And what I found was a very different way that the women were speaking to each other in their social networks. The way they were reprimanding each other. The way they appeared to be telling each other off, but at the same time, their experience on that particular course. So, a lot of my visits, a lot of my journeys actually involved me in listening to these women in those social networks, you know, getting an opportunity to hear how their learning was, to a large extent, transforming communities. So the concept of matriarchal learning hubs, you know, takes us to this business, the fact that, you know, we are in this aging society. And those of my mother's generation who are fast, you know, moving away, for me, this was about the voice of that generation. This was about the contribution that that generation made and are still making. This was very much about, you know, how it is that we